Hi all, thanks for joining in for today's webinar focusing on current trends in climate tech investment by NSRCEL in partnership with Remo. Let me just set the context and talk a bit about NSRCEL. NSRCEL is the startup incubation hub of Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. We help startups and bring different ecosystem players in the entrepreneur ecosystem to make sure startup get the necessary support required in their initial stages. Uh, I would like to specially talk about our climate incubation hub program, which we have launched in partnership with HUL to nurture startups in the climate space. The program is live, and we will be soon in the chat box sharing application link as well as the website link for the program. The program focuses on three specific areas. First one is in alternative energy and renewables. Second one is sustainable agri-tech. And third is circularity and waste management. So if you are a startup building in these particular three areas, do check out our website. We have all our offerings presented on our website. You can scan the application link here. It will also be available in your chat box. You will get necessary one-on-one mentoring support, access to corporate, VCs, alternative financing agencies. We make sure that you get all the necessary support required to ensure your startup thrives. That's it about NSRCEL and our NSRCEL and Climate Incubation Hub program in partnership with HUL. Now, I would request Ruta to talk about Remo. Over to you, Ruta.
Thanks, Akshay. First of all, really appreciate you inviting us here. So kudos to you on that. Happy to introduce Remove. We are an accelerator program for carbon removal startups, originally started in Europe, but launched in India last year, and our first cohort is underway. This is a technical program specifically for expertise on carbon removal technology, MRV, fire support, that sort of a thing. And we are looking for our next cohort. I'll also drop in a link in the chat. One of the things that stands out from our program is we focus on helping the startups survive, especially figuring out additional revenue streams. And so far, we have worked with 150 startups in Europe and India combined, and over 90% of those startups are still active. So we really are proud of those statistics, and would love to work with additional Indian startups who are working in the carbon removal space. Thank you. Over to you, Akshay.
Thank you, Ruta. Thank you so much. If you have any questions related to the program, NSRCEL programs or from Remo, you can just ask in the chat box. Also, if you have any questions to our panelists, you can drop in the question. We will take it after the initial discussion. Now, I would like to hand over to Nachiket Kulkarni, AVP Social Entrepreneurship at NSRCEL, to take over. Over to you, Nachiket. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Akshay, and thank you, Ruta. It's a pleasure to have this webinar. And, NSRCEL has been working in the climate space for a year, probably more than a year, right? Around 3-4 years. But then we're now seeing a lot of convergence of different sectors coming in. We've had teams specifically working on mobility. We've had teams specifically working on mass mobility, sustainable mobility, and circularity, climate smart agriculture isolatedly. But what we're seeing now is we're always behind demand with respect to catering to entrepreneurs in the climate space. And we sure want to build larger ecosystems because we feel that isolated incubation programs are just not enough. And we need to be sort of, committing long term to, to these sort of initiatives, which I think should be the focus of what even countries are looking at, right? So that's the context, and hence we do a lot of webinars and events in this space where we feel like entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs, innovators, academia, etc., would gain from industry practitioners. And hence, I will sort of now bring on board our two industry practitioners who have agreed to give their time to this specific panel. I am Mani, who is the founder and CEO at Banyan Nation. and Himanshu from Tia Ventures, who have agreed to give time. And I think over the next half an hour or 45 minutes or so, what we would want to talk about is current trends in climate tech with respect to investments. But I think how I would want to make it relatable to a lot of you who could be potential entrepreneurs in the audience is how do we sort of divide this journey, probably before fundraising and after fundraising. And I think we'll sort of cover a VC's point of view, and we'll cover the founder's point of view. But before that, maybe, I'm very bad at introducing other people. I would love Mani and Himanshu to sort of probably give 2 lines about what you do right now, and a little bit about your companies as well. Over to you, maybe Mani first.
Hi everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Excited to be here. I'm Mani Vajpayee. I'm the co-founder of Banyan Nation. We are a plastics recycling company based out of Hyderabad. So I quit my career in the Valley about 10 years ago. I used to work for this company called Qualcomm. And then maybe alcohol, stupidity, all these things made me quit my wonderful career and do garbage. But jokes apart, I've always been passionate about solving real problems like healthcare, education, waste management. So I partnered with a gentleman called Raj, who's been a friend of mine for the last 25 years. And probably over the course of the next hour or so, I'm going to talk more about our work. But here we are today, recycling plastics, working with brands to put more recycled plastic in packaging, and also working with over 2,500 of the informal sector aggregators in India to drive circularity in terms of polymer collection, recycling, and putting it back in mainstream products and packaging.
Thanks, Mani. We'll definitely get to know you more as we go. Himanshu, over to you for your introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Nachiket, and thanks, Ruta, and for the entire NSRCEL team for the opportunity. So, a little bit on that perspective, I think the alcohol didn't work out for me in that manner when I was shifting the careers, but at least something which worked out because I've worked particularly in the banking, then in the policy, and then now in the investing. So, studied in India. I did my manufacturing engineering from BITS Pilani and a minor degree in finance. Finance excited more. Started with JP Morgan. Was there for 2 years. Got bored a little bit of the monotonous work of banking. Then thought, let me do something differently. Then I joined Delhi government and worked on a lot with the different departments. This was a peak time of the COVID as well, where I worked in over that point in time. But since you are in Delhi, you are working with government, a lot of climate tech related things you come across, or the climate change related things you come across. And I got a chance to start a small fund as well, which is more like a collective together to work the COVID people, direct or the migrant workers which are impacted by the COVID in 2020. Things fast forward happened out there is joint consulting sector, social impact consulting, and then realized that technology, finance, and policy became a major lever for my career, and that's how I started working in Thea Ventures. It's been 3 years with Thea. We are an early stage climate tech focused fund, invested in 10 companies so far across the various domain of climate tech, which we'll definitely be discussing what all different sectors there is. From starting from smart meters to flying taxis to sustainable textiles to sustainable biomaterials to industrial decarbonization, we have invested across the sectors. We invest at pre-seed and seed stage. So anyone building in -1 to 0, 0 to 1 kind of a journey point where we want to come in and then help a lot with our companies to actually go from the critical milestones which you have to achieve for the next sort of fundraising as well, and accordingly make sure that they become ready out there is in terms of this entire nitty-gritties of climate tech to make sure that build up really good scalable business.
Thanks, Himanshu. Great. So I think I would probably cover, a lot of the challenges that a founder or a potential founder goes through is the discovery phase, right? Like for instance, even I was an entrepreneur before I joined NSRCEL, but then I feel like my journey would have been completely different if I had met NSRCEL or some other incubator giving me that sort of advisory, giving me that sort of support. So maybe a question for you, Mani, is who is Mani? Where were you brought up? What is that family background? Does the family have some sort of a business background? How did you get into this? What made you think you can make money out of recycling uh, plastic? So if you can explain that discovery journey to the revenue journey, along with maybe a few personal insights about yourself. I think we can start there, and I'll probably give you like 3-4 minutes. And then I have a very interesting question as a follow-up to Himanshu as to how a fund looks at the founder persona itself. So yeah, we'll start with you, Mani.
Sure. I mean, I'll start. I'm a classic South Indian engineer in electrical engineering, right? I mean, a good student. My mom's a school teacher, my dad's a railway officer. But today, my brother runs. So my brother and my sister had a profound influence on me. My brother is one of the key guys at HSBC in London. Previously, he was with Citi. He's a banker and a technology guy, and my sister runs her own company in Washington, D.C. But obviously, in my growing stages, neither was my brother a corporate executive, and neither was my sister an entrepreneur. So I think for me, I'm a first generation entrepreneur. But the way in which we grew up in South India, grew up in Vizag, and I did have the value instilled in me in terms of problem solving right from a very young age. My mom's a math teacher, so that probably explains half of it. And the most interesting phase of my life is probably the turmoil that I went through during my undergrad days at REC Warangal, or my PhD program that I dropped out in the US. And even my 8 years at Qualcomm, where I was helping build the iPhones. There was always a deep turmoil to maximize my skills. Yeah, I was a fairly good engineer. I was a fairly good um, guy when it comes to solving problems. But around 2008 and 9 was when I was in the US. I mean, maybe to give you a funny anecdote, in San Diego, I believe, and we were drinking. I used to brew beer. That was the thing back then in Colorado and San Diego and California and all that. So I was brewing beer, drinking beer. So my wife told me one Saturday afternoon that, hey, I think you need to understand something. You can't keep drinking beer on Saturday evenings and talk about world problems and India problems to be solving those problems, right? So you really need to put yourself out there to do this, right? But jokes apart, I had great mentors at Qualcomm who kind of knew my passion that I would invest in each problem solving that I was doing. And in one of those long flights from San Francisco airport to Hong Kong, where we would cross over to Shenzhen for the iPhone manufacturing, because I was part of this whole iPhone thing. In those long flights, one of my managers, he said, listen, you seem to have a lot of passion for India. Why don't you take a sabbatical for 2-3 months, travel India, explore the problem statements that you want to address, and then maybe rebalance and recalibrate. So that was like a very important moment for me. So I spent almost 2 months in some villages in India with a Gandhian who had a very profound impact on me, and he was trying to transform 100 villages. So I learned a lot about cooperative networks, milk farming, small scale farming, Krishi Vigyana Kendras that India had already set up. So that experience really helped me understand some of the problem statements that happen in India's hinterland. And once I came back, I spent another 3 years at Qualcomm again, launching the iPhone 4, 5, 6, whatnot, before I made the move. Once again, mentors are very important. People who know you and your talents. So I joined the Columbia Business School and UC Berkeley dual MBA program because I was doubly stupid. So I needed 2 MBAs to get me out of my hole. Jokes about again. So I did this dual MBA program, one in the East Coast and one in the West Coast. So I met this guy called Ron Gonen. Ron was actually the head of recycling for Mr. Bloomberg in New York during my MBA program. And I told Ron that I was really passionate. And Ron today runs one of the largest circularity funds called closed loop funds based out of New York. And this was 2011, I believe. So Ron was just the head of recycling for New York. So I hit it off with Ron. And during one of those walks, Ron told me that I think you should be building this waste management company in India, given your understanding of the markets and your passion for this space. Because the filth and squalor in India was deeply disturbing me during my travels in India. So that is how, like, mentors at Qualcomm, my brother and my sister, my parents. I mean, there's obviously my wife's contribution in telling me to get off my ass and not drink beer on Saturday afternoons and complain about India. And Ron helping me put more pedal to the metal and giving me the ideas and frameworks. So Ron said, you can visit all the landfills in New York. I'll make calls to Houston. I'll make calls to San Francisco. So I was actually sitting in the rate hearing of City of San Francisco in 2012, where waste management contracts were being given out, and annual contracts the public can sit and hear. So I was sitting in those areas. So a wide range of experiences, both personal, professional, and mentorships. And then last but not the least, in 2013, I asked my, and then we were incubated at Columbia Greenhouse Incubator, Columbia Business School's Greenhouse Incubator. And we did really well in the business school competitions, case competitions. I used every single coursework at Columbia University and UC Berkeley. So everybody loved me because I was this guy who wasn't trying to figure out what he would do after an MBA. I went into an MBA program with the idea of building a business to transform India. So whether it was my finance course, economics course, supply chain course, even negotiation course, I already had a term sheet ready. So I leveraged the ecosystem really well, and I came out of Columbia and Berkeley with Banyan Nation. So right out of school, I quit Qualcomm. So my boss was like, okay, it's a big move, but it had to happen. Then Raj quit his career. I spin good stories. So I convinced a perfectly happy Raj with a great career and made him quit his life in Seattle to work in garbage in Hyderabad. So these things I do to people. But anyways, these are the origin stories, a wide range of experiences, mentors, hustle, desire, turmoil. I think the very standard playbook that makes you an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Ron. Even I was, I mean, this person like Ron is probably very important in everybody's journey, and you never know where this sort of a person comes from, right? So,
Yeah.
when I moved back to India in 2012, I was sitting in San Francisco shores, but I didn't meet a Ron, right? I met someone else, which triggered my entrepreneurial journey. But I think it's more important that the lesson here is be open to sort of meet people and sort of discuss what is going on in your industry or the industry that you're looking at.
I still, sorry to Nachi, I still talk to him. In fact, 3 months ago, when I was in the US for work, I still called him, and he still guides me and mentors me even to date. So I continuously seek guidance from people and seek out people first, like you rightly said, and continuously seek out advice from people, be it investors, entrepreneurs, or family members who've been there, done that. Yeah. Sorry for that again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Himanshu, now that we have heard a money story, right? Uh, for a fund like Tia, what does this journey mean, right? Do you evaluate founders based on, let's say their vision, adaptability, resilience, subject matter expertise, or do you go beyond saying, okay, you will have to evaluate the founding team, see complementary skill sets, trust their ability to navigate challenges? Maybe, yeah, if you can touch a little bit about, how does the founder persona, founder skill set, and the founding team's maybe, history or chemistry influences a decision before you decide to invest in something?
Sure. So I think Mani gave a very good, more sort of a nudge to that question as well. So early stage is a lot about conviction rather than the numbers part of it. And when it comes to the conviction, I think three things plays a very critical role over there. First thing is the team. The second part over there is the entire, or I'll say maybe not in always the case, is it basically in case of deep tech climatic startup, which is a technology which is around the part of it. And then the third thing is the timing of the sector. These three things is very important for you to understand that whether we can take a bet or not. Now, a lot of people say this thing, and which is something which is everyone is aware about, that the early stage investing is an art rather than a science for that thing. Now, in that art, one critical element which plays a role is the thesis of an investor and the thesis of a founder out there is. If that matches in terms of an understanding, the building up of a conviction out there plays a very critical role, in which the first part is that thing which like Money mentioned, that having the right clarity to the path, that how he or she gonna achieve that. See, everything is on paper when it comes to early stage. Maybe you can have like a small prototype or some traction around it, that's a different question. But the point is, still the things are on paper, the plan is on paper. When you're making it, the clarity around it, that how you go from A point to B point to C point to D point, I think that makes very important part. Like what Money mentioned, that when he was in the MBA, his intention of going to an MBA because he wants to build something. So he was very clear with that approach, that why he's going for that thing. That is one skill which we really need in terms of a founders, that they should be very clear with the path to approach on it. The second thing, Nachiket, we mentioned, I think, a founder cannot have all the skill set. But a founder should know how to hire a right person and put it across in the right place to make sure have a skill set. And I think again I'll pick it up from Money's story only, when he convinced Raj to come in, right? That's a sort of a part when it comes to an entrepreneurship, because you can't be good at everything, but you know that the people you're working with are good at that thing, and you're placing them in the right part of it. Because founders' time is very crucial when it comes to early stage. They cannot be investing their time everywhere. So this is where a lot of time we prefer that we think in that whether a solo founder is a good option for or not. Generally, it's preferred that we should have more than one founder at early stage, because the time has to be divided. The third part over there is in the team, the complementary skill set as a whole. What that one founder is bringing and what the other founder is bringing on the table. A lot of time, at least what we have seen, founders making mistake in climate tech is they focus a lot just on the technological piece initially. These businesses inherently are a longer sales cycle businesses. You cannot expect the people to, maybe for example, if you're building something in packaging for this point in time, you cannot expect the big FMCG brands to say you they'll give you the contract within 6 months or 8 months down the line. It is a longer sales cycle, but you have to start working on the part to commercialization, the strategies of commercialization from the day one. So then comes the third part, the complementary skill set around it. And then the last part, which is the fourth, is that the initial part of it, that other than the vision, the perseverance around that idea becomes super important. Because and it's not just related to climate tech, it's a part of the entrepreneurship, that vision can take you up to a certain thing, but then how you are related or how you're connected to that problem statement and why you wanted to solve that in the first place makes very important. Like, we have one founder in our portfolio company, which is in the battery recycling space. The minute he doesn't solve that battery problem, he'll not go home. Like, I'm not saying that that could be there, but I'm saying that the perseverance around it, that he's so stuck to that problem statement out there, that I really need to solve it. So I think these few things play a very critical role for us when it comes to early stage. But then, and this is like 60 to 70% of the mix. Then rest percent of the mix out there, because we invest a lot amount of our time in thesis building about a sector, the timing of the sector, how the sector plays out a role, etc. for that thing. For an example, last year we took a bet in a flying taxi company. So we took a lot amount of time. We saw that sector before as well, maybe 2 years back, but at the point we have not invested. Now after 2 years, we invested in that sector because we see the timing of the cruise sector was right. That was coming out from our thesis directly. So if these things matches out there is, then we go ahead with the investment.
That's great. That's great, Himanshu. I'm wondering. I think we'll cover this sort of the trends of what sort of different founders you are actually meeting off late. But back to your money, right? From a pre-revenue or just a term sheet to building what is now a 100 crore company and raising Series B, would love to sort of get your insights for everybody on how do you prepare your team and your organization for a fundraise, and what does it take at different stages, right? If you can cover journey of Banyan Nation at different, let's say the journey map of fundraising, at what stages, what sort of preparations were internally required in terms of market readiness, in terms of compliance readiness, and if you can cover at what stages, who came in with the growth of your business. Can take 5 minutes for this.
Sure. I mean, agree with a lot of points that Himanshu just mentioned, but just to benefit, I mean, now that you asked me, I'm going back the last 12 years of my journey, but I think it will, if it benefits the larger audience who may be interested in such a thing. So one of the things that gives me a lot of pride is while I was in business school, genuinely like using every single class, every single opportunity to visit these landfills. So I did the Lean Launchpad class with Steve Blank directly. So Steve was my teacher, Steve Blank, which I think you guys know, the Osterwald canvas and also. So we were in Steve's house in Route 1, and Steve basically taught us the importance of the pupil dilation in a customer's eyes, where if you are building something, you need to be able to convince, even before you have built a product or anything, that this is a pressing problem that I'm solving. Are you passionate about this problem? Will you pay for this problem? Is this bothering you, right? So that customer discovery, customer activation problem frameworks, I took very seriously. I took really, really seriously. And I learned a lot in that journey. I used to sit whole night calling municipalities in India, explaining to them that I'm calling from the US. I have all this like amazing team, and I'm going to transform India's waste management. In fact, I wanted to be a waste management company that would do end-to-end garbage and not just plastic recycling. So the pivots that you take as you journey through the business are also extremely vital. And getting out of college, and when I decided to launch Banyan Nation, in my final semester, there's a guy called Drew Curtis. He used to run this really interesting website called fark.com, FARK.com. And I mean, if Drew hears this maybe later sometime, and he'll be like, he told me several times, Money, if you're going to launch any business, count me in for that initial seed check. It's a different matter that I did not take money from Drew, but that's the kind of cohort, or that's the kind of team, like you, that's the validation you need. First of all, there's no greater validation than your cohort telling you that, dude, if you're going to be starting a business, here's my check. And very interestingly, there's a friend called Gokul Krishna who was at Apple during the time, and he's in Bangalore now running his own water startup. He said, Money, if you're going to be starting a company, here's my first check as well. So, and obviously Gokul and I go a long way back, but that and validation from the closest of your friends who've seen you in all silliness and everything, right? They know you fully, but yet they're committing to invest in your business. That's a true testament to your sincerity. And then obviously family members, they chipped in. So my first seed round, I had already raised by the time I even graduated from Columbia Business School and Berkeley. Then we did not burn up the cash. Raj obviously joined in, and then we both moved to India, quit our careers, left our homes, cars, everything to be cleaned up by our wives, right? We dumped everything on their head and we moved to India. So for the first 1 year, Raj and I did nothing but build the thesis, like Himanshu was saying. We were not building a thesis for an investor, or we're not trying to sell anything to anybody. what we were trying to do is we're trying to take a problem-solving approach to this. If you take plastics as a whole, where's the supply coming from? Or why a recycling business around water bottle recycling, which is PET recycling, is moot? Because PET recycling, India had a 95% recycling rate. Metals, India have a very high recycling rate. Paper, India had a very high recycling rate. So you don't need a Silicon Valley engineer to solve an already solved problem. And we were not looking at aggregator models and things like that. We were foundationally trying to solve problems. So that took us another year and a half. So in 2013, we raised that angel round. And in 2015, once we built the thesis, we built the first material recovery facility. We've mapped out the first 5,000 kabadiwalas. And there was an article in your story, oh, 2 Silicon Valley engineers quit their careers in Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and then like high-paying engineers, whatever crap that is there, everybody writes. So all that was going on. And Raj and I are like, wait a second, we are not Uber of trash, because you can't Uberize away climate change. And that thesis that Himanshu was talking about, we are like very clear on our own thesis. What is it that we want to build? So Raj and I had this deep conviction. So every entrepreneur, when they look at the same problem, has a different take, right? So Nachi might have a different view on the same problem, and I might have a different take on the same problem. And that's what Raj and I were willing to celebrate. So our thesis was, you had to build a supply chain like you would build Amul's supply chain for milk, integrate the kabadiwalas, build a back-end unit that segregates the plastics, and develop plastic recycling technology. How we arrived at that is a 2-year journey. I'm going to skip through all that. That conviction allowed us to raise a $800,000 round in 2015. And that's another story for the ages. But we raised it from a hedge fund manager in New York, actually Greenwich, Connecticut. And that was our seed round. Then the next phase, and what he looked at is, how clear are we on the thesis? How are we articulating the problem statement? What is the path? And he has already demonstrated a grid from me and Raj that Himanshu was talking from the original seed round, right? We did not burn the capital from the seed round. We still had some capital left. We found all this thesis and we'd done all this hard work, right? So we then raised an $800,000 round. The next round was difficult because nobody was willing to give us money based on that vision, because everybody was looking at the market. Is recycling making any sense? Is regulatory framework going to make sense? So what we did was, I don't know if I'm boring people or this is like really like putting them to sleep, but seed, so angel to seed, and the seed round, we also needed a lot of help. KKR, Travis Kohlberg and Roberts, they were mentoring us. And they were giving us help. We actually had pro bono service from Latham and Watkins, one of the big law firms, to actually draft up the entire agreements. So as an entrepreneur, I had this global exposure to convince a law firm that would have charged us like what, $250,000 for this round, to do it pro bono for us. And that was a big deal, right? The ability to do the cap tables. And I was my CFO, come CEO, come sales and all that, because 2 MBAs in finance, and if I can't get like projections done, then ding is on me. I mean, right? That's like really sad. So then the next 2 years really went in Raj and me saying, okay, here is the supply chain. We told the seed investors, if we can't convince at least one FMCG brand, one auto company to use our recycled plastic in the next 1 year or 2 years, then there's no business here. Because I don't want to sell recycled plastic in the local kabadiwala market. So between 2015 to 2016, we won the World Economic Forum Award for Circular Economy, 2018 January, for launching 2 products. One bottle-to-bottle recycling with L'Oreal, and bumper-to-bumper recycling with Tata Motors. And in 2018, we won the World Economic Forum Award at Davos. So I went to Davos, right? And then for that, I really had to spend money in buying this suit because everybody gave me FOMO that you're going to be rubbing shoulders with everybody. And I realized that like the suit was the biggest waste of the money. I had a blast at Davos. So in Davos, basically, I networked like crazy. And then we came back and Unilever said they were going to run trials with us for using our recycled plastics. And that's when we end up raising our Series A of about $3 to $4 million to commercialize the technology that we had developed for bottle-to-bottle and bumper-to-bumper recycling. That journey is completely different again, right? Because they were looking at real traction, real contracts. And again, in Series A, we said no to one of the biggest and more popular venture capital firm that was willing to give us the $3 to $4 million because I didn't necessarily agree with the terms or the vision. So Himanshu mentioned, the thesis has to be the same. The thesis wasn't the same. They were looking at Banyan Nation based on a plant project economics. And I was trying to tell them that we created the market for circular economy in India by putting the first bottle-to-bottle, bumper-to-bumper recycling program. You're not valuing what we did for polymers in India. We've raised the level of conversation for circularity in India. If you're not able to see it for what it is, then you're not the right investor for me and for the space. Sorry about it. That really pisses off venture capital firms to see the conviction of an entrepreneur so strong. But I was already closing in on my 40, right? So I'm now much older. So when I had seen my 10 years of Silicon Valley cycles, and I had done like already 6 years of me building the business. So that Series A was a very difficult journey with me saying no to more investors than yes. If I had taken money from this fund, which is a climate circularity fund, then I would have actually not had Banyan Nation today because such were the onerous terms in terms of the milestones, deliverables that they put on us. So Raj and I had that conviction that this does not make sense and these guys don't know how to build the thing. And again, Himanshu, coming back to your point, a fund has a 7-year life cycle. I am not here for a 7-year life cycle to make some IRR for some investor. I am solving a problem, and if the investor is interested in getting on my bus, then it's up to him. But it's difficult to have this sort of conviction unless you're sadomasochistic or unless you're basically not right in your mind. So luckily, I had a very good team. And this is the other point you mentioned. We not only invested in building the technology, but we've invested in building very strong teams. It was just not me and Raj. We had our supply chain head who was from IIM Ahmedabad, who worked in the microfinance industry. We've hired somebody from Columbia Business School who knew how to engage with brands. We started hiring plant heads. The guy who was building our factory was ex-Coca-Cola and Pepsi plant head. So this sort of team building also took a great deal of conviction and courage. Then Series A, we raised the money, we built the factory, then COVID hit. The resilience to go through COVID, come out on tops while battling regulations in the country to ensure that recycled plastic becomes the norm. Because why would anybody use recycled plastic if it is more expensive than virgin? They wouldn't. So we had to work with the Indian government and the various organizations to enforce these regulations. So then we raised our Series B in 2023, fairly large ticket size, right? And then between 2019 to 2022, we raised 3 bridge rounds that were onerous, convertible notes with heavy discount rates because they were not accretive to me. They were very dilutive to me. But at the end of the day, we stayed the course, right? And the investors will tell, oh, let's build a platform that integrates all the kabadiwalas or the aggregators. Let's do asset-light exponential models because that fund manager has a 7-year cycle and he wants to exit. But I'm not here to exit. So when you push back and say, I'm going to be doing this, which is asset heavy, then they will not appreciate that. So you have to make a call as an entrepreneur, whether you're going to be okay with the dilution and stick to what you believe in, or you're going to basically play along with the investor, which can be extremely debilitating. You lose the company. Anyways, so all that happened. We raised money from petrochemical majors. We raised money from petrochemical distributors. We raised money from major banks. We raised money because I was carrying them along on the vision that circularity is going to become a reality. And then we raised a Series B about a year and a half ago, fairly large ticket of $30 million in a combination of debt and equity. So overall, we raised a substantial amount of capital, around close to $40 million over multiple stages, requiring multiple validations of customer centricity to MIS profitability to like your P&L to EBITDA margins and all that. So various stages require various level of sophistication. And today, when we no longer should be calling ourselves a startup, because our search for that repeatable, scalable model has ended. Like you would say in your lean, right? The difference between a startup and a company is the search for that repeatable, scalable model. We were searching for that for 9 years, and we've perfected our customer base, our revenue model, our distribution channels, and everything. So today, my Oscar business model canvas is full. We are clear, and today we're running a good, stable business. So it's a long journey, but I hope there's some value for people to take from this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think money. There should be some book or something about this, right? Because I feel like yes, it's been a great journey, and I think you have probably taken that burden on being the initial category disruptor in the circular economy space, because I remember sort of reading about you guys from 2015, 2016, and there was not too many examples out there for someone like me to take a conference and run independent incubation program. That happened like in 2021, because then that's when the critical mass happened. That's when we saw people like you raising funds, staying the course. But I think one of the points that you mentioned was very interesting, and I'll probably get Himanshu to pick Himanshu's brain on it, is how you used your capital efficiently after your seed round, right? Himanshu, if you can cover certain insights and certain examples that you have seen, and both the good and the bad, as to how important it is to manage post fundraise capital efficiencies within your organization. And if you've seen in cases where it has gone wrong, please feel free to mention examples, probably without naming them.
So Nachiketa, I think to start with that thing, one thing when Mani was mentioning the entire story, one word which comes out straight to my mind is hearing Mani's story is the rigidity on the thesis, right? He and I spent 1 year building that thesis, so he was very clear how to go about it. The point which is there is, and I think back to the same thing, that if the thesis of an investor and a thesis of an entrepreneur are not right, and the path is very different. A lot of time, the entrepreneurs spend their money in figuring out some other things at some point, right? See, you have to be very clear in what approach you are taking. Let me give you an example with that thing. And I think one of the best examples in our portfolio is a company in the flying taxi space. Okay. Now, there's a sector which requires a huge amount of money to go about it, right? One thing which a lot of companies in the world thought about is that can we go in that way that so the founders has been very rigid from the day one that we want to build it for transportation. Now the point is it's a top to down approach. If you build it for a transportation, you have built it for any use case in the world for that thing, because the certification for transportation is the most difficult one to get in, because you're carrying a human from one place to another, right? Now the point is a lot of time in the conversation, maybe for other companies out there, it came out, let's do one thing, let's start with cargo out there. It's because we can start getting a revenue around it initially. Okay, because in case of a cargo, you don't need that kind of a certification to go in, because you're not carrying a human from one place to another. Now the point is the structure of a vehicle for a cargo is different for a structure of a vehicle if you're carrying a human from one place to another, which is for the mobility use case, right? If if the entire team, and when I say team, investors are also like your early employees in the company, right? Which are with you out there every month to also more sort of with you to understand what you are building. Because like the way Money mentioned, I think that was a very interesting point, that if I cannot able to sell to an FMCG at that point in time, because I don't want to sell to the kabadi wala, there's no business around it. So everyone at an early stage is backing out there is that there has to be a PMF which has to achieve more. There's a product market fit. Now, if in this between out there is because of the entire cycle of the fund and everything, you just no, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this ABC approach out there, you'll not be very frugal with your resource management. That's the most important part. This is where at least I have seen a lot of people at an early stage makes a mistake. The second thing out there is the when you are decide, I think strategy at an early stage plays a very important role, that if there is and to achieve same point, if there are 5 to 6 paths to go around it, which one is best for the company and which one is the most optimized pathway. You cannot just say that I will hire the maybe the best of the world salesperson at this point in time to figure it out that my sales would done it. But the point is you cannot do it initially. It has to be founder-led sales, which you have to do it initial part of it. So the question is the decision making over there is that how your resources can be optimized in the right manner. That becomes second important part. Because founders have to do the initial sales of it, then the team gets built. It's a very simple story. Like you have to first maybe become one sort of Avenger yourself, then you can be in a Nick Fury position to make sure that you build a team of Avengers, right? So that's the one thing. And some of the really good founders have done this thing. I know an entrepreneur, not based out in India, but a dear friend. He's based out of Australia, and he's building something in the energy space. And he has not even burnt more than 100K till this point in time within the team, because the point is he knows that my team is capable enough of doing sales and everything, the founding team itself at this point. I think that becomes an important part for a seed stage. When you go for a scale up and say achieve the PMF, then comes out the duplicacy of that model. So that's comes the second part. And then the third part over there is, which again the point is money out there is, patient capital plays a very important role on the top of it. Understanding that when you are raising the fund, which kind of an investor you are raising for, and what is the fund cycle, life cycle for that investor is. Because if, for example, like Money mentioned, 7 years is the point out there is. The thought process to exit in a company is very different if a fund life cycle is 10 years comparatively, because you can give initially some point in time to make sure that you can go with a very strategic approach towards it. I think these are the few things which makes the strategy of resource allocation very good. And again, I'll give that example. This flying taxi company of ours, which has launched their product in Bharat Mobility this January, did their entire thing in 1.5 million, which a lot of people took a more amount of money to go out, especially in the US market for that thing, because the founders were very clear with the thesis, how to go about it and how to make sure that they're building. You are not spending an investor's money to build a thesis. You have already have a thesis and package. You have figured it out some point in time. Then now you have to go about it one step to other. It's like a Lego. You know that how to make. So that's an answer to it.
Thanks. So I think I'll probably cover this last question and I'll probably do it reverse, right? I think Money spoke longer. I'll give him some rest. Um, and this is also for the audience, the right time to start putting down your questions on the chat box. But I think we'll close with what is out there for the future, right? In the near future. And, question for you, Himanshu, is, considering you guys are a patient capital fund, and how do you decide to allocate your dry powder? And how do you do this while in a sector like climate tech, you'll probably see new technology and new sectors emerging every day. So how do you plan your fund allocation, and how do you instill confidence in one sector over another while you plan your capital deployment?
Yeah. So I think there's a point which we have been learning each and every day, or the thing which we have been learning, because climate is becoming a very generic sector at this point in time. So you have multiple sectors around it, and then we have a fund, and then we have an allocation over the top of it. I think the first part plays a very critical role is two things around it, that whether when you're looking at a sector, whether the assets are in that sector, which are called the green assets, for an example, in that man, are developed or not, or whether you need the assets to be developed. For an example, that if you look at a solar, wind, or any renewable space at this point in time, we don't need to put money as an early stage investor in building up an assets. Now you have to put in money in the optimization of that asset, right? Which can be your electric mobility, which can be your solar panel, more sort of analytics, etc. for that thing. Now comes the second part, where are the spaces where the assets needs to be developed in the sector. For example, biomaterials as a space. We still need really good biomaterials manufacturing companies at this point in time to say that we can command a really good product at a materials level, which is in the alternate materials center. So that's the first way which we decide at this point in time. Second thing is most of our portfolio, if you see, is been asset heavy portfolio. We have invested in most of the asset heavy businesses because we know that fundamentally it is very important to first invest in the assets, then only you can make it, because manufacturing is important for the growth of the sector as a whole. So then we decide that at that point in time, how process engineering in that plays a very critical role. That is a technological piece of it. Like the way maybe taking an example from money story, that uh, plastic recycling has been there. It's not like a new business which historically has not been there in India for that matter. But the way Banyan Nation or Money and Raj have seen it very differently out there is, and how they build the business model or the technological innovation around it, that comes as a part of the entire engineering piece of it, that the process engineering plays with, that becomes a scalability and replicacy in the model. So that comes the second part of us seeing those sort of thing. And then third thing out there is that where does the geography like India play a very critical role over there? Because we also need to understand that, see, we don't have a surplus amount of money in this geography, right? At this point in time, we cannot have, like, say that we can get 5 to 6 million in grant at this point in time to say we'll be able to underwrite the entire technology on the basis of it. The technological underwriting also has to come from an equity money. The manufacturing also has to initially come from an equity money, unless and until the chicken and egg problems get solved. Then only the debt funding get come in, right? So initially, we have to be very frugal in understanding out there is that where does the resource, where does the India story plays a very critical role. Like we have a very good thesis when it comes to waste to value. Like for example, the entire waste which is get generated in the country, how we can have like a new materials coming out there is where we invested in two portfolio company. One is Canva Loop and All Time Buy for that thing. So one is using the hemp, banana, pineapple waste. One is using the rice husk waste to make a product out of it. So I think these things play a very critical role to say that which sector to pick up and how, and within the sector also which industry to pick up over there. And that one of the great example, if I have to just take it over there, had happened in the alt material industry. Because alt material industry we were very interested in, and we always knew that we have to we have to invest in manufacturing. We have to get our equity money, definitely go and buying the capex for that part of it. But the founders which we come across with a very strong thesis around it. The second part over there is the waste is available in India at this point in time at such a cheap rate that you can make a really good product out of it. And the third thing is there are a brine customers also available in India for those. So if that piece of the equation gets solved out, that sector definitely something which we want to take a footprint.
Hey, Manchu, thanks. Maybe one last pointer from that to back to money, right? And maybe this is a Nikhil Kamath style question. If someone is, I'm not going to mention age or whatever, if someone wants to start something new right now in the climate tech space, considering the capital flowing in, considering the new policies that are coming in favor compared to 10 years ago when you started, what do you see as the new emerging sectors which will be relatively easier for people to innovate and scale?
I'd look at battery recycling seriously. I'd look at materials with the material focus. I'm being very specific here just because the question you asked was asked me to be specific, but I can go cover a lot of things. But when I say battery recycling or I did not say, electronic recycling with a focus on materials, I feel is not a mature market yet. There's a huge opportunity to disrupt in terms of material extraction efficiencies, in terms of repurposing the extracted materials back into circularity. That's like a very beautiful open space where you can provide tangible engineering value with a solid moat. And then also it's like probably the most pressing problem of our times as well. You're not seeing the impact of it now, but when all the Teslas become old, then we're going to start seeing the problem like really magnified. So that's what probably offer up immediately as a knee-jerk reaction to your question.
Okay, awesome. All right, I think I will just bring in the audience and the audience questions now. And I'm not going to go in a specific order, but I'm going to look at what just prompted on my screen first. We have a question. How should a startup navigate the chicken and egg problem of fundraising, which Himanshu, I think you covered, where investors demand a prototype before committing, but once the prototype is built, they ask for traction. Why would a startup even approach investor if they already have a traction?
So can you hear me? Yeah, yeah. You can hear me, right, Nachiket? Yeah, got it. No, I think honestly, I think that depends upon again investor to investor. I think if I put it in that manner, um, uh, the point around this, the chicken and egg problem will definitely arise to you once you have a prototype or something out there is being done. For example, two ways to think about it. Like Mani mentioned, battery recycling as one of the. We have a battery recycling portfolio out there. Is the founder did a different approach. The out there is he raised a small amount of money initially, and because his process engineering was good at this point in time, he set up a small unit to say that and figure it out that I can extract lithium, cobalt, and nickel directly from that thing. And that gives a conviction, okay, that you will be able to give it out. Now, if we can invest even in the capex out there, is we know that you'll be able to sell a really good product in the market because it's a commodity market. See, that again comes back to the same pointed out of the thesis. So in that point in time, when he was being looked upon by a lot of investors, a lot of investors said no to him because they didn't wanted the equity money to go into the capex. But we said yes to it because we know that even if we not get the money into the capex, how will we get the traction around it? That's the first thing. So that comes again as a part of the thing that which investor are you talking about? That's a fair point. That once you have the traction, that why would I go to the investors? But the point is, Banyan Nation also had a traction, but they still went to the investor, right? The thing is, once you have an interaction, then you need money to scale up, right? At that point in time, now you need money for different things. Although you have to build a team, you have to have the processes in place, you need other sort of things to be done out there because you need to scale up things to be out there. But the answer to that question depends upon the investor which you are approaching. So that's why should be very clear in terms of what is the thesis of that investor in that sector is. Because a lot of time now we have been asked a question and I keep on repeating this in multiple. Please ask investors also the questions that why you want to invest into this sector. Because if they have a clear answer to it, that marriage will be very successful. Otherwise, it will end up in winner divorce.
Great. I think coming from an investor will give a lot of confidence because founders don't tend to ask questions. Founders don't tend to ask probably something like, "Hey, why?" or something like, "Which year of the fund are you in?" Like, would that, because that definitely affects the kind of relationship and what of your post successful fundraisers and fund closes have been, because that again that data is not available outside. But I think thanks for those insights. We have one question for Mani. Why did you focus on plastic recycling and not overall waste management as a problem statement?
We started as a overall waste management company. Corruption, bureaucracy. So overall waste management has to be delivered as a contractual service by the government, and you are basically bidding for contracts, right? That did not necessarily align with mine and Raj's ethos as founders. we did bid for waste management contracts in India in 2013. In fact, that is why, while we are known as Banyan Nation, our company's registered name is Banyan Sustainable Waste Management Private Limited. We were doing that initially. And bureaucracy, red tape, corruption, inefficiency, everything basically said that. So I was very passionate in solving the problem. And so I said, India has a tremendous opportunity by working with informal sector recyclers, just like Amul did with the milk farmers. So why don't we work outside these systems that are going to slow you down as an entrepreneur, rather than work within the system, right? So that is the only thing. You pivot. That was one of the pivots that Raj and I took very early, even before we raised seed or anything like that. The first 2 years and 2.5 years for us was market discovery and all that. Yeah.
Cool. We have, I think the first question, or the open question, maybe Mani, if you want to sort of answer on the chat itself, because it's more specific to your company. But I'll go back to a question for Himanshu, and some of it is something you've already covered. So what combination of factors do you consider when evaluating early stage climate tech startups for investment? Are disruptive technologies a key consideration, or financials play an important role in the decision-making process as well?
The second part to it, when it comes to the company's financial, everything is projection at an early stage. So I think more than financials, what the part which is important is that what is the part to commercialization for that technology looks like. That's the thing. We are definitely very open to disruptive technology, because in climate tech you have to be a disruptive technology. Otherwise, you can't actually solve the problem of climate change as a whole. And this is one of the reasons. Again, I'll take with an example that we saw the battery recycling sectors. Before investing in our battery recycling company, we saw 6 to 7 battery recycling companies before that. But why we invested in this particular company out there is because we know that because of the technology, it makes sense, a really good sense at a process economics level out there. So then the company would be able to gain some significant market share when you have the economics playing out really good for you. So we are very open to always a really good of disruptive technology. We face some issue because of the entire Money can definitely speak a lot about it in terms of the entire regulations in the space of recycling. We saw a setback a little bit out there initially because of the battery recycling, because a lot of the bureaucracy don't know how to look at these kind of a business when a pollution control board is looking at them. But the point is open to that. But I'll say more than the those Excel sheet, what matters out there is that how you'll take this company from a lab to first of a kind of a model, what's journey going to look like, and that clarity out there. A good point, a good data point out there is we always think in that manner is that a lot of these kind of technologies has been worked out in a US or a UK market in that thing. These geographies have these kind of models available out there. So studying them and then understanding that what problem they faced, and accordingly what you can't actually do a little different around it, gives a justification.
Cool. Mani, back to you. What are the software assets that exist today in the climate tech space? How do we get more information on various products in this space? Do you think an aggregator platform here will solve this initiative?
DeepSeek. Go to DeepSeek. And, so it's going to build you the aggregator platform as well quite quickly. But no, seriously, I mean, jokes apart. I mean, this is the kind of hustle that you would expect from an entrepreneur. This is definitely something that you need to basically evaluate, right? The software assets and how do you get more information on the various products in the space. Because I can come up with a bunch of list of things and it won't mean a thing to you. Your take on whether an aggregator platform matters for climate tech is your own unique take. There are aggregators in plastic recycling. For example, there's a company called RecyCal in Hyderabad that they're out and out aggregator. So that's both, like they started 2-3 years after us. That's a very distinct thesis. I and Raj started and said, we are going to not do this because we don't believe that this is the path forward. In the same city, 2 years later, in the same incubator space, somebody else started the company and they've scaled it and they're doing what they think is the right way, right? So these are things that even Himanshu mentioned. Your conviction as an entrepreneur, your thesis, and you have to find an investor who's willing to back you a long term on those theses, right? So some of my investors want me to build an aggregator platform, and some of his investors probably want him to make a more asset heavy model. And so we should swap out our investors and the monies they've given us, something like that. So I leave it to Venkatesh to figure these things out, because this is the kind of research that you should be doing.
Okay, great. Hey, Akshay, do we have time for one more or do we close it here?
We can take one more, Nachi.
Okay, cool. Let me see. Okay, so again, for money, do you see automation and quality control for waste sorting and MRFs and recycling plants being applicable in Indian markets?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. The long answer is a lot of riders. We use a lot of robotic sorters ourselves, and robotic sorter just does not mean replacing human workers and putting these armed robots. We have them as well. Robotic sorting extends to color sorting, flake sorting, polymeric level sorting, and things like that. So these are fairly advanced technologies. The second aspect is the data centric aspects of the sorting and all these help us in driving efficiencies in the back end. So the short answer is absolutely yes. Will they be disruptive for us to displace the workforce? Yes, but at the same time, they bring in a lot of efficiencies that far exceed the displacement of a workforce for overall circularity. So that's the way to look at. Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I'll take one more, Akshay, last one. I think this is an interesting one for Himanshu. I mean, I know you're an equity fund, but I think as a sector expert, you can answer this. How can early stage climate tech startups raise debt for CapEx when major banks or NBFCs request backing for collateral? And would an investor be willing to back a startup for debt?
No.
I think I have money answered that. That's the chicken and egg problem.
Yeah. But I mean, do we have examples of someone obviously raising equity for the fixed capital, machinery, etc., etc.?
I'll probably
Yeah.
jump in and answer. Yeah. I mean, see, once again, you guys have to look at it's interesting because they just sent me the calendar because they love me. No, just joking. Exim Bank and some of the Indian banks, they did some really good work. Exim Bank has this Ubarte Sitare. Yeah. Exim Bank has this Ubharte Sitare program that you guys want to look at. So the government of India has done a lot of put in a lot of effort, right? And also you get this MSME 2 crore collateral free loan options as well. So it's not like options don't exist. Options do exist. And of course, there's also the global DFIs such as DFC or BII and so many others working in emerging markets, supporting not only NBFCs, but local banks where they securitize and they collateralize and they take on the risk for supporting entrepreneurs. So a lot of clever avenues exist, but overall, I think it's fair to say that venture capital investors or seed investors or private equity investors, private equity investment is a completely different space altogether. But venture capital, it's not the job of venture capital investors to do this stuff, right? I mean, we have to be very clear on what like each of these investors mean. And you can't go to a bank, State Bank of India, and show them a financial projections for the next 5 years and ask them to give you a 50 crore loan, because banks are just not designed for giving loan on financial projections. They're looking at hard assets and cash. So I think an entrepreneur needs to have the sophistication to understand the financial instrument that he is approaching at the right stage of the company. So I think that's my take on that. Yeah.
So Arpan, to answer that, in fact, I'm hosting a webinar next week because this is one of my favorite topics is to be doing a webinar on innovative financing in climate tech startups. And we're getting examples both from like a fund from Netherlands and from a venture. I mean, that's why the whole ecosystem of I mean, conventional banks, right? For instance, NSRCEL has a partnership with Indian Bank just to enable debt. Before, and we've actually referred a few climate tech startups and they've gotten debt. It may be a 3-month turnaround time, but it came at a very, very low interest rate for the entrepreneur and at probably a little later than they wanted, but it did. I think we're just giving banks those examples where they can also feel confident about it. And of course, hence there is also, because of inefficiencies and those, also there is a whole ecosystem of new fintech players who are coming and doing revenue-based financing or other things. So I think being part of such an ecosystem will let us introduce these sort of players to entrepreneurs at probably the stage that is right, because otherwise entrepreneurs are not aware. So do sort of be plugged in with our social media. We'll be covering different financial instruments next week. But thank you very much, Mani, for your time. And thank you very much for sharing your personal journeys, hardships. You look tired right now. So if you want to leave, we can let you go.
No,
Himanshu,
Nachi, just one
ah,
last request
photo, is it?
is if I ask all of you three to look into the camera and smile because I'm trying to take screenshots and I'm able to do so. So just one remove spotlight for me. Mani, please look into camera. This is super helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I got a bonus. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Mani. And Himanshu, thank you again for spending time with us and also being on. I know you visited and been on multiple NSRCEL demo days. So thanks for being a long-term partner and sharing your knowledge and networks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nachiket, for inviting us. Super helpful, super great conversation. I think really great questions. So looking forward to maybe interacting more entrepreneurs maybe in the coming time over there.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
back to you,
Take
Akshay.
care. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Guys, if you want to apply for NSRCEL Climate Incubation Hub program, do check out the chat box. We are sharing the link. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.